welcome to the session this tea time. Hopefully it'll be about 45 minutes to an hour, and there are times for questions at the end of the session. So please do put your questions into the chat function and we will answer them as at the end of the session with all the questions together. So this session is support for disabled students into higher education, and with me today I've got my colleague Jackie from Barnsley College of HE, Alison from the University of Sheffield, and we've also got a disability champion from the University of Sheffield, Grace. Okay, and I am the project coordinator here at Hepp, so I'm going to talk a bit about who we are. So we are the Higher Education Progression Partnership. We use Hepp for short, and we are a jointly funded organisation with the University of Sheffield and Sheffield Hallam, and we provide impartial advice and guidance out to schools for young people and adults to think about higher education, and we work across South Yorkshire and North East Derbyshire. I am, as I said, the project coordinator, and I support underrepresented groups into higher education, of which one of those groups is disabled students, but I also support young carers, care experienced students and mature students as well. So just a bit of content behind the session today. We are here to talk about the accessibility, so understanding that higher education is accessible to disabled students. We're looking at terminology because that is quite different from school to when they go on to higher education. We're looking at all the different types of support that is available for the students. Then disabled students allowance, we'll talk a bit about that, and then some guidance, so provide that guidance on supporting disabled students. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pass you over to Jackie, and Jackie's going to start off our session. Thanks, Jackie.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Jackie Reaney, and I am the Higher Education Disability Advisor at Barnsley College University Centre. My title gets longer every year, so I'm just hoping that they stop now and I can just keep to that length. But in that respect, it doesn't really matter which of us speaks, because the process for DSA within a university or within a higher education institution is exactly the same. And that's a good thing, because it means whichever one of us starts working with you, we can hand it over to the next person in the chain at your destination university. So we all do exactly the same thing within our separate institutions, although you'll appreciate that the universities and the higher institutions themselves will perhaps pan it out slightly differently and have some differences along the way. But we all follow the same rules, follow the same guidance and use the same process. So while we're talking about the differences and the similarities between them, on the left, there are phrases that you will know from school, from sixth form, from FE college. And when you get to uni or to higher education institutions, those kind of disappear and they turn into different phrases. So your special needs, your additional learning support, your SEN, well, that becomes disabled students support. People have varying reactions to the word disability, but we hang on to it because the Equality Act of 2010 gives it weight as a legal procedure, as a legal covered by the law, as a legitimate covered by the law within the context of the Equality Act. So disability is one of the strands covered by the law. That means that if we don't provide reasonable adjustments, pretty much you can try to sue us over that. So we have a legal responsibility to be providing something that sits within the Equality Act. Therefore, that's why we hang on to the phrase disability, to remind everyone how serious and how legal this sits. The phrase disability as well at this point, when we get into universities, the phrase disabled students is a broad umbrella, and it covers anyone with a diagnosis of something that will interfere with how you study. So it doesn't matter whether it's anxiety or dyslexia or autistic spectrum condition. If it's something that determines how you study, what differences you need, what you find comfortable about the building, what you find difficult about your studies, then those all come within the broad category of disability, and that's the only place where everything that is a health related issue, mental health related issue, dyslexia related issue, they all sit under this broad umbrella of disability. So on the left again, SENCOs, yourselves, you'll know about your SENCOs in college and in school. Well, we take on board all the things that the SENCOs bring to you, and we are the disability advisors or the disability coordinators. It's not exactly the same role, but you won't find a SENCO in university. You will find a disability advisor or a disability coordinator. And similarly, the SEN team or the learning support team then becomes the disability services, and that might sit within student services or inclusion or well-being. So, you know, if you're looking for it, look for the word disability. You know, I've known students who might have spent 2 years in a university looking for additional learning support and thinking it doesn't exist. It does, but it's called disability services. So you have to get used to looking for that rather than additional learning support. Another difference is that a learner doesn't need at college or at school, you don't need a specifically in-depth diagnosis in order to get your support, your access arrangements sorted. So you might just have a dyslexia screening, or you might just have something that identifies you as having maybe emotional vulnerabilities. When you get to university, it's really important to be aware that Student Finance England will require a full diagnostic report. That's not us, that's not the universities. We don't always like the strictures around that, but Student Finance England require medical evidence with an NHS logo on the letter. For dyslexia, they'll require a full psychological report, educational psychological report. For other GP evidence, health conditions or anxiety, they'll need something from your GP or a specialist with an NHS logo in the corner of the letter. And from that as well, the EHCP, sorry about all the letterings, the Educational Health and Care Plan, which you are so well used to, it's not that we discard it when it gets into university, but we have to take it all on board as part of our work, and it's not existent anymore as an EHCP. So we take on board what's in there, but it doesn't hold its own weight, except, and here's the anomaly in it, except it can be used as evidence for autistic spectrum conditions. And that's really strange for SFE to have made that rule, because they won't accept it for any other diagnosis, but they will accept it as evidence of ASC. So if you apply with your educational health and care plan as your evidence, and if it says Liam has autism and anxiety issues and is also dyslexic, then the response from Student Finance will be, yes, we accept the autism, but we need alternative additional evidence for the dyslexia and for the anxiety. So be aware of that. That's not our decision, but it's Student Finance in England are very meticulous about that. Next slide, please, Kelly. So a disability service, what is a higher education disability service? That's us. In some universities, there's a whole team of us. There might be 5, 6, 7 disability advisors. At Barnsley, because we're quite small, there's only me. But you need to seek out your disability team and begin to make a rapport with them, begin to liaise with them, because they're the people you need in order to get things changed or flexible study options. Okay, it's not going to happen through your tutors. It's going to happen always through your disability services team with that important resource. Maybe not, I don't like to think I'm an important person, but what I do is an important resource. Equal access, that's our focus. That doesn't just mean physical access into the building, although that's important. What it means is that we've got to look at how best to make your studies fair. And that's about making sure you've got somewhere you can study without feeling anxious and stressed, so avoidance of very busy communal areas. It might be that you need a dictating package, or it might be that you need extra time. Our focus is on working out specifically what would give you the best chance to succeed and work around any health issue or disability. And that's personalised support. Again, there, we sit down with you and we work out what might you need here. Extra time for your exams, provision for you to leave a lecture just to manage your anxieties. We look at what matters to you so that you're going to get a more comfortable learning experience and so that you don't feel uncomfortable in your studies. So it's always tailored around you. It's always tailored around everything you might know already that you need and things you might not have explored yet. Confidentiality is a real important thing to be aware of. We maintain a confidential service. That means that, unfortunately, once you're at university or on a level 4 course at higher education institution, we don't talk to your parents once you've arrived about what you need. We don't talk to your college or your school. We don't go back. We don't get any information from anyone else but you. You own that disability, and if you choose not to share that, we will only be asking you about it. But I suppose our mission is to make you feel comfortable in disclosing to us that. And over the summer months before you come, of course, we'll speak to your family. Of course, we'll get to know what works best for you and share that information. But be advised, when you get to university, we will be just speaking to yourself. And that would mean then that I might say, you know, if I were you, I'd let your mum know what we've said about this, but I won't be telling mum and I won't be telling dad. It's up to you to take some ownership of that. Hard to get used to that idea, I know it is. Early contact. When you hear us saying we're going to encourage you to make early contact, we don't mean the start of term. We mean before you come. We mean over the summer. The paperwork, the forms come out in end of February, beginning of March. So you can apply then to your chosen university and you can start putting together your package of support. But the earlier you speak to us after that, gives us the chance to start to put that together over the summer. If you leave it till the start of term, because student finance have a very slow process, just because of the numbers they're dealing with, it can take 2 to 3 months, and that might mean that you're still waiting for your equipment at Christmas. But I mean, I'm having conversations at the moment about what students might be looking at for next September. Early contact, make contact with the disability team, and often, usually we work through the summer holidays. So, you know, we will be as available as possible for you to start to plan your route into university, wherever that university is going to be. You don't have to know where you're going to end up, because we'll work through the process of getting you everything you need, and it sits on a cloud so that at the point when you know exactly, I'm going to be in Manchester or Leeds, then it's delivered to you. So even if you don't know your final destination, you can still get into that process of getting it all ready. Next one, please, Kelly. So we're the designated point of contact. We're the disability advisor. We might be called a disability coordinator. We all do the same job. Keep in contact with us. We provide ongoing advice and guidance, not just now before you start, but during the whole of your course. So you might come back at the end of year 1 and say, can I change some of this? Can I have access to a dyslexia coach, which I turned down before? So importantly, we're there throughout your course. And if there's anything that you feel needs to be challenged or changed or reshaped to match your second year or your third year, come back to us. That's what we do. We liaise with the rest of your tutors to make sure you've got everything that provides an ongoing positive experience. Yes, we review your previous support, as I've said. Anything that you've become used to at school or at college, tell us about it. Remember, we won't know about it unless you tell us. We can't probe around historically your records. You have to tell us, and then we'll look at what might continue to work for you in uni. We identify appropriate university support. So that might mean the things that aren't through the DSA bundle. It might look at extra time in exams. It might look at, oh, I need I need my print in large font. It might mean, oh, I need a dictating program. So we look at, I mean, one of the things I would look at is extra time for your library books, so that if you read at a slower pace, then maybe having those extra few weeks on a library loan gives you the opportunity to work without some stress. So there are all kinds of things that you wouldn't even think of that we can get involved with, but you have to come to us, you have to come and seek us out. And we guide you through the DSA process. It sounds complicated to yourselves. It sounds complicated when we say disabled students allowance, but we can take you step by step through that, and it is quite straightforward. Thank you, Kelly. And so the easiest way to make good contact with us at the start is on the UCAS form. My first recognition of a student coming in who I might need to work with is the front sheet of your UCAS form. And I know at the moment, applicants have been completing their UCAS forms, and they do still get a bit worried about what's going to happen to this information I put down on the front sheet. It's not going to go to your interview, and it's not going to go to your academic team. It will hit the desk of a disability team and will flag up, here's somebody I need to contact. Then we contact you and say, you've ticked dyslexia, you've ticked anxiety. Shall we have a chat about that and what you might use? And that importance of disclosure, that's what we say. We don't get that information from anyone else except you. So if you don't tell us on that UCAS form, or by making yourself known to us, if you don't tell us you're dyslexic, we won't know. We cannot gather that information without you coming forward first and disclosing that to us. Okay, thank you. Okay, I think now it goes on to Alison. I think she's going to take over about accessing the support and who it might be available to.
Thanks, Jackie. Yeah, so I'm Alison Jones, and I'm the Disability Transition Officer based in the Disability and Dyslexia Support Service at Sheffield Uni. So in terms of who can access support, so Jackie's already said a bit about this in terms of, so it's about meeting the criteria for the Equality Act. Definition of disability. So basically, any student who has a long-term impairment or condition that significantly impacts on their studies is eligible for support through the disability service, and also eligible to access support through disabled student allowances. So it is a broad term, and many students that don't think of themselves as disabled can access support from the University Disability Service. So it's absolutely fine if a student hasn't identified as being a disabled student prior to university. It's just about meeting that definition to ensure that they have access to the support that will then enable them to work towards meeting their full academic potential at university. So that includes students with a specific learning difficulty, learning difference, anybody with a long-term mental health condition, students with long-standing illnesses, medical conditions, autistic students, students who have ADHD, physical impairments or mobility difficulties, students with sensory impairments, and students whose speech, language or communication is affected. That obviously includes students with multiple diagnoses. Now, if a potential applicant or student isn't sure whether they are eligible for support, then we would absolutely encourage them to make contact with the University Disability Services that they're thinking of studying with, because they should be really happy to provide that information and to guide applicants in the right direction as well in terms of gathering evidence to be able to access support. It's quite likely, if a student has accessed previous support in education, that they will be eligible for support at university, but we might just need to give them a bit of a help along the way in terms of being able to obtain the evidence that they need to be able to access the full support. Okay, thanks, Kelly. Okay, so we'll have a little bit of a think now about what support might actually look like at university. So support means providing the necessary study strategies to support the student to overcome potential barriers in their studies and reach their full potential. So when we're meeting with students, that's what we're thinking about. We're thinking what might the barriers be to a student's learning, and what support is available within the university to remove those barriers, whether that's through individual reasonable adjustments or thinking about the inclusive practice that's available within the university. Types of support will depend on a student's specific needs, their course, and the support that's available at the university. So there will be, so in terms of how we work with the student, we very much take, it's very much about the individual. So when we're meeting with a student and having that appointment, it's focused on that individual. So it's not a case of, okay, you have a specific learning difficulty, so therefore this is what we'll do. It's okay, you know, let's talk about you, let's talk about previous support, let's talk about what the barriers might be, let's think about what's happening on your course at the moment if you've already started, or let's try and anticipate what some of the challenges might be. There will be some differences in terms of what's possible, potentially because of the course a student's studying, but also because of the support that's available at the university. So like Jackie said, in terms of disabled student allowances, which Jackie's going to go back and talk about, that goes with a student to any university, and DSA is available according to what that student needs, not what's available within the university. In terms of actual support that can be put in place by the disability service that's based within the university, there might be some differences in terms of what the actual university provides. And again, that's in terms of reasonable adjustments, but also in terms of the inclusive learning practices that are available within that university. So because not all higher education institutions have the same types of support, it's important that individuals do their research, particularly if they're looking for specific types of support that's really important to them. So the way that support is organised at university, so some of it comes through the institution's disability service and some of it comes through a student's disabled student allowances, which is why we encourage applicants to apply for DSA, because that ensures that that individual then has access to the full package of support that's available. So to everything that could possibly be available to them through both the disability service and through DSA. So depending on individual needs, these are some examples of support on the next slide. Okay, so exam adjustment. So that's often the main reason why an applicant or potential applicant will get in touch with us, because they're concerned about finding out that they'll have their exam support in place that they've had in place in previous education. And at that point, that's a good starting point to then say, yeah, you know, we can talk about exam support, but also let's talk about what else is available at university, because you might find that there's quite a lot more available, some of which you might not be aware of. So in terms of what type of exam adjustment that is, again, it depends on the individual, their needs. We've got to be able to justify the support that we put in place at university, but we take into consideration what a student has accessed in previous education. So if they've had a type of support that has enabled them to have full access to the exam assessments, then we'll obviously take that into account. We're not about removing exam support that enables a student to have full access to their exams. Examples might be things like 25% extra time, rest periods, use of a PC. It might be making some changes to the exam environments. It might be sitting in an exam with fewer students or wearing noise cancelling headphones, things like that. Learning support plans, learning contracts. So regardless of what it's called, because it will be called different things in different universities, there will be a communication system in place so that we can provide information to a student's academic department about the student, so we'll give some information in terms of their diagnosis to confirm that a student is eligible for reasonable adjustments through the department. We'll give some context as to what that means to the individual student, and then we'll make recommendations for how we would recommend a department supports a student. That will again vary depending on the university, depending on what inclusive practice is already available, because it might not need to be recommended as an individual reasonable adjustment, but it might be things like providing lecture notes in advance of teaching sessions. It might be providing reading lists which prioritise the reading that has to be done, and then what could be considered secondary reading. It might be about letting a department know that a student might arrive late or need to leave early from teaching sessions, or might need to take a break within teaching sessions, for example. Face-to-face support to help with managing studies or to develop study skills. So that's type of support that would come through disabled student allowances. So that might be specialist study skills tuition for a student who has a specific learning difficulty, for example, or who has ADHD. And then in terms of help with managing studies, so that would be about a student accessing specialist mentoring. So that's really practical focus support, which focuses on time management, organisation, prioritisation. So supporting the student to manage their workload at university. And the specialist mentoring role is for students who are autistic and students who have ADHD and have a mental health condition. Support workers, so there are other types of support from people. Some of the support worker roles, so things like like I said, the specialist mentoring and the study skills tuition, that would be funded through DSA, but some of the support from support workers might not come through DSA, and then that would then need to be considered as to whether that's a role within a specific university. So it might include things like lab support. It might include a library support worker for a student who needs support to access the resources from the library, for example. Now, in terms of testing for a specific learning difficulty, so we see a lot of students who have made the transition from school, sixth form, college, that have had that can provide evidence of having had a screening assessment to enable the school to evidence access arrangements, so to be able to put exam support in place, but they might not have actually had a full diagnostic assessment for a specific learning difficulty. So some universities might be able to put in place some temporary exam support based on access arrangements, but in the meantime, then be able to refer a student for a full diagnostic assessment for a specific learning difficulty. Again, not all universities have that process in place, and not all universities can make the referral to an educational psychologist. Some universities fund that, some part fund it, some means test it, some don't fund it at all. So again, there are differences, but if a student is potentially going to arrive at university without a full diagnostic assessment, so therefore will not be able to apply for DSA just based on having had some screening, then it's really important to find out what the system will be once they start university, if they're not going to seek an assessment before starting or before becoming an applicant. So Jack is going to talk more about DSA, but generally, in terms of, again, types of support, it might provide support to travel to and from higher education. So if public transport or walking into university, if that isn't an accessible option for a student, if they need support to get into university, to travel to and from university, then DSA might be able to provide a taxi allowance. Specialist equipment that students need for studying. So there's a lot of assistive technology now to support students to produce the written work that could be recommended through DSA. Some students have access to a laptop, some have access to a printer, for example, or ergonomic study equipment. And then alongside the printer, some students then would, students would most likely then be recommended an allowance to support them with the cost of buying the paper and the ink cartridges. And I've already said about support workers, so specialist study skills, support and guidance mentors, and sign language interpreter support that would be funded through DSA. Thanks, Kelly. Okay, so in terms of, so this isn't about DSA, this is about how to set up support through the Higher Education Disability Service. So it's really, really useful if students, if applicants complete the disability section on their UCAS form. So that enables the Disability Service to receive information via the university about the applicant, and that then enables us to contact that applicant directly to give them information about how to set up support. So it means we can reach out to applicants. It's fine, as Jackie said, it's fine for applicants to be in touch with us before we do that. but it just means that if an applicant isn't in touch with us, then we have made contact with them. Send diagnostic evidence to the disability service. So we will need diagnostic evidence. We encourage applicants to send it in, even if they think it's incomplete and not what we need. Send it in, because we can then offer advice on that, and we can also offer guidance on how to obtain what will be needed. Have contact with a disability advisor to discuss an action support. So support through the disability service isn't put in place automatically. We don't request any information from schools. We don't know anything about that individual applicant. So the only way that we can put support in place for an applicant, for a new student, is to have direct contact with them to determine what their support will look like, so that we can then put that in place. So we rely on applicants informing us that they are considered to be a disabled applicant, a disabled student, so that we can then take the steps to put their support in place.
Right, I'm going to go back to the phrase disabled students allowance, because that is probably the biggest headache and the biggest thing that parents, families are asking us about. It sounds complex, but it isn't really. This is what buys all the support and stuff. The disabled students allowance is held by Student Finance England. If we're in Wales, it will be Student Finance Wales, but here, looking at students at our side of the country, it's Student Finance England, and it's a government fund run by Student Finance England. It's not money, it's stuff. So it pays for technical equipment, one-to-one support workers, maybe taxi allowance, and maybe reimbursements for printing, etc. So it doesn't come as money. We put together through Student Finance England an application, and what happens is when they've agreed it, they buy it all. You don't have to go out, you don't have to seek out suppliers. The DSA fund is governed by Student Finance England and available to everyone who is within their courses, and it's a fantastic fund. It's been around for 30 years and it's the best kept secret. People still don't know about it. So you need to access the disability service to get information about the DSA. That's the best thing to do. And also it splits between your decisions the stuff that will come from your HE, your university, your higher education institution. That'll be one side of it. The other side is about getting this DSA budget to work together with it. So there'll be two separate strands. Your disability team will advise on it. So most UK students will be able to access disabled students allowance. It goes wherever the student goes. So if you get it and then you move from Manchester after year one and go to Leeds or go to Sheffield, then it goes with you. There is no repayment. It's not a loan. It's not means tested, and it doesn't interfere with any benefits. It doesn't count as any money. Whatever is bought through this fund is yours to keep, is the applicant's to keep. So that's why it's really important to get in with this, because this is going to be stuff that after your 3 years, you'll take it away with you. You don't have to pay it back. You don't have to give it back. If you move for universities, it goes with you. So eligible courses, the last bit at the bottom, is for any level 4 course, HE course. Not access courses, because a lot of students doing access to higher education, but actually that's a level 3 course. So they don't qualify for the DSA funding. It's got to be a level 4 course. Not an apprenticeship course, because that's kind of a split with employers taking a responsibility for some of the elements of that funding. But still, ask the disability service in your host university, because they'll know what you should be looking for from where. We know it step by step to go through that. You can't apply for it until February, but we'll take you through step by step. Next slide, please. So you apply for it at the end of February, start of March. That's when the student finance forms come out. There are two. Firstly, there's the one you complete to get your tutorial payments, your course fees, and or a government student loan. I would advise get that in place first, because then it's an easy track through. We apply then for for DSA funding from the same people, and because you're already in their system, they'll recognise it when we send the application in. Oh yes, you're in the system, we can move this forward. Sometimes if you're not in the system and if you try to do the DSA application first, they have to sit on it until your application for tuition fees comes in, and then occasionally there's an error and that falls between two stools, and student finance is still waiting for the DSA, and that's already been sent in. So I know that we're all aware where there are errors, potential sort of mistakes to be made. So we'd always say apply for your tuition fees first, and then the DSA is really quick, but neither of them can be done before end of February, beginning of March. So, but in the meantime, you can be getting your evidence together. Make sure you've got a diagnosis that is acceptable by SFE. Ask a disability advisor if you're unsure, because I would rather the right thing went in than 3 weeks down the line student finance saying, actually you sent us something that isn't eligible, you have to start all over again with it. So we need to be sure that your evidence is going to be acceptable. Ask a disability team at your destination university or your current higher education institution. Then when they're happy with that your evidence is acceptable, that you're in the system, they say, right, now you can attend a study needs assessment. That frightens people because it sounds a bit like an exam. It is where somebody works out what you need. It's usually done on a camera call, a remote call. It used to be always one-to-one, face-to-face meetings. Those are possible, but more often you choose a time you want this to take place. It takes about an hour. Somebody talks to you about the stuff you've had before, what you feel you might need now, and also includes what each destination university can offer. And that's called a study needs assessment, an assessment of what you will need. Access support, that's when the study needs assessment, the report from that, the shopping list of what you're heading for is sent to student finance, and then they write back and say, right, you can go ahead and order it. And you can contact your disability team to help with that, but it's the entitlement letter that tells you what you're going to get and where you're going to get it from. And as we've said a few times, apply early. Start at the beginning of March as soon as the paperwork comes out. And it doesn't matter if you don't know which university you're going to end up at by September. As long as you have an application into some university, then you can start this process at the end of March. Okay. And the checklist, just to repeat and repeat and repeat. First thing, fill in your UCAS form and identify a disability on the front sheet so that it gets the attention of a disability team. Then, in the meantime, be putting together your evidence. There is a form on the website there, and which any one of us can direct you to. From Student Finance England, there's a form which you can take along for your doctor to complete, and with a statement of all of the disabilities or all of the health conditions attached to yourself. Go to relevant transition events and open days. Contact us if you want us to give you some ideas of what to ask at open days. For example, if you know you're going to need an ensuite facility for your accommodation because you don't do shared toilet provision or shared kitchen provision, then that's the sort of thing that we would say this is what you ask at open days. Find out as many open days as possible that you might want to explore. Be prepared, again, to flag up early to the destination university evidence that you might need accommodation adjustments, because obviously they're not going to just give you something that might be a preference, but they're going to say, and why do you feel you need this? And it's good to have your medical evidence then, or your ASD diagnosis. Preparation for independent living, self-advocacy. You need to constantly be aware that as a learner coming into university, you have ownership of your disability. The university will expect you to talk to us about what you would need. They'll also expect you to arrive being able to manage independently, or to how to use buses or a taxi facility. but also have a level of self-awareness and be happy about talking to a disability team. We can't help if we don't get to know all of the details about your struggle and the barriers that you've faced. And you know, it's all confidential. We'd start with that, and we'd hope that you would feel comfortable with sharing with us as disability teams. If your application comes through clearing, be aware to get cracking with a disability service as soon as possible before that. You know, it doesn't matter whether you're waiting to get confirmation that you're going to be at Sheffield Uni or Leeds. We work with you on the expectation that you're going to be somewhere in the system. So don't wait until you finally know about your destination. So setting up university and DSA takes time. It's not always about how quickly we work. It's about how quickly SFE can push the whole of the north of England through to the assessment centre. But don't be frightened to contact us at different stages of their studies. You know, we're happy for anyone at any point to say, look, I really should have told you last year, but I didn't mention my mental health issues. Can we do anything about it now? Yes, we can pick it up at the minute you tell us, not before, but only when you choose to be comfortable with sharing that with us, and then we'll respond to it. So always better to plan ahead. That's it, I think. Our move on now is to speak to Grace. Grace is going to talk to us. Grace is a University of Sheffield student, and she's going to talk about her own experience of applying for DSA and contacting disability services. Hand you over to Grace.
Thanks, Jackie. So hi everyone. As Jackie said, I'm called Grace. I'm a third year biomedical science student at the University of Sheffield. To give you a bit of context, I work as a disability champion with Alison at Sheffield, and basically can go around and talk about my experiences of studying at university and sort of different supports what I receive. Provide a bit of context, I was originally diagnosed with dyslexia and DLD when I was, I want to say about 10-ish, can't remember off the top of my head. Oh no, a bit younger than that, about 7 I'd say. And then a couple of years ago was then diagnosed with autism while I was at university after being on the waiting list for quite a while. So my support, sort of receiving support through education, was pretty diabolical, to be honest. I found it not the best. A lot of people I know find it that way if you're not majorly disruptive. I was a quiet kid in the corner. They weren't that bothered, to be honest. It got better at college. They started listening to me a bit more, but I never really had that sort of feeling that I was ever listened to, or that anything what I wanted to sort of support with were ever taken that seriously. And that massively changed when I came to university, to say the least. So I obviously was going to apply for DSA, and I did that purely on the basis of dyslexia and DLD, just because those were the only two I had actual diagnoses of at that time of. But while I was there, I was just chatting with the sort of disability, the needs assessment people, and they were more than happy to sort of answer questions and just sort of explain to me the differences in support what I could receive after sort of another diagnosis. That were really helpful, as it sort of put context to everything. I received some study skills support, a laptop and some printing stuff, so stuff that really helps through DSA specifically, and then through DDSS, what's the University of Sheffield Disability and Dyslexia Support Service. I received stuff like access to yellow stickers, what are a scheme specifically run at the university to basically, you stick it on a piece of work and it shows that you've got a communication difference. What's really helpful, because it means lecturers give a lot better feedback normally. I also get exam arrangements. This is something that sort of evolved over sort of the last few exam seasons, I want to say. Every time we think we've finally cracked it now. It took a while for us to sort of work out what were best for me, because the exam support was never there through sort of high school and college. And then I suddenly came to uni and they're like, oh, you should have been having this. And I'm like, oh, I thought that too, but hey-oh. So at the moment now, I'm in an individual room. It sounds really scary, but it's not. They're the nicest invigilators known to man, and they just sit with you in a little room, and it's lovely. The lovely old people normally, they pick the nice ones. Alison's laughing at me. What is never a good time. But we're going with it. With just a computer, so I do all my exams on sort of a desktop computer. It's really easy. If it's a multiple choice exam, I'll still use the paper, but it just helps that I can sort of write things down as I go. So yeah, that's pretty much all the support I receive. I also get specialist mentoring for my autism, what's really helpful. I just have a meeting a week with someone who can just go through what's happened, make sure I'm doing okay, make sure I'm keeping on top of everything and not burning out. They're really good for that for me, because they can tell a lot quicker than I can normally. If I'm on that path to burnout, I can sort of go, hold a little bit, Grace, you're doing too much. But it's definitely really helpful, especially at uni when you're in high deadline seasons. It can be so easy just to work and not stop. So it is really useful to have different supports in place. So yeah, I'd highly recommend people applying for support through DSA and DDSS. It's massively changed my outlook on disability in general. I've gone from a place where I wasn't supported to feeling like people listen to me and I'm in control of the support that I want to receive. What is so important, and if you'd have told me like 3 years ago, this is what I'd just, oh yeah, Alison will send me an email, do you want to do a presentation on this? I'd never think that I was doing that, but because of the different support I've received, it's now made me feel a lot more confident sort of being disabled almost, and be happy to talk about stuff what I think is really, really important. So yeah, that's me done, I think.
Thank you, Grace. That's amazing, and I'm so pleased that you are getting the support that you deserve. And you know, that's detriment to yourself. You know, you've got that support for yourself. It's not, obviously the university have supported you, but you've also helped that journey as well. So you're doing amazing. So thank you so much. We are going to obviously have time in a few minutes to ask any questions to Grace and obviously the panel. While I'm putting on the last slide, just a bit about information that we offer on our website. My colleague is going to run a couple of polls that will come flashing up on the screen, and then the links will also go into the chat. So please, if you could answer them, they're really helpful for us to improve on these sessions as we go through and to help and support more students like Grace. Okay, so I'll just show you back my screen. So while those polls are going on, hopefully you can now see that slide as well on the screen. So Hepp also have a website that we are in the process of updating, and that website address is on the link there on the page. On there is lots of resources specifically for students with disabilities. We also have a resource called Here For You that has just recently been updated and rebranded, and that has blogs from students with little quotes that talk about their experience of going into university as a disabled student. And as I say, there's lots of other resources on there. There's a parent and carer resource that you can access that is currently being updated, but the information is still very relevant. It's just being rebranded as we speak. And obviously there is lots of other information for both universities that are partner us. So please do take a look at that website. You can download the resources, but if you would prefer to have a physical copy, you can always email us on the website, on the email address that we can put into the chat at the end of this session. That will come up on the last slide actually. So please obviously take a look. While we are going on to the questions, I just want to say thank you so much for attending this session. As I say, we've got the poll up there today, but your feedback is just really, really helpful to help us to make better sessions for you and give you the information that you may require. So it just improves our future sessions. So there's our contact detail on the screen. As I said, we are recording this session, and the slides and the recording will be sent out to you, so you have them to access. What I'm going to do now is I will pull these, take off the sharing slide and put us all on the screen so that you can ask any questions you have. I think there are some questions in the chat, but I think Alison, you might have answered some of them as you went along, which is fantastic, but we'll just double check as we go along. Let's see what we've got. Many schools are now supporting students based on need rather than diagnosis. This is crucial given the long waiting. Yes, absolutely. As Grace is a detriment to that, getting being on the waiting list. I wonder whether student financing will reconsider the need for medical evidence given these waits and challenge to getting a diagnosis. What's the consensus on that? I think, Alison, you might have answered it. But I can't see. Go on, go, Alison.
Sorry, so I did put an answer, but just to say, so lots of universities now have the system where we encourage students or applicants to request medical evidence from their GP for a probable or working diagnosis of ADHD or autism. So we are very aware of the long waiting times, and we are very aware that, relatively speaking, students aren't at university for very long, certainly in terms of the amount of time they're in a semester at university studying. So it's really important that we can have some way of confirming that a student is eligible for support. So we can do that through a working diagnosis. So once they've been referred for an assessment, diagnostic assessment through their GP, there is the form on the student finance website for DSA that can be given to the GP, so it makes it really clear in terms of what they need to provide. But it can be working diagnosis, probable diagnosis, and so applicants can then use that to give to their university disability service, and they can also use that to apply for DSA, with the caveat that it is generally accepted for DSA, but we came across a bit of a situation last academic year where suddenly they stopped, Student Finance England stopped accepting a working diagnosis. But I think there was enough kind of intervention from various universities to mean that it seems fine for now. I haven't heard of that happening again, so they seem to be accepting it again.
Lovely, thank you. And the correct place for the disability diagnosis on the UCAS form is the part where it asks regarding disability, and you'd get alerted, wouldn't you, from that being put on there? Yeah, excellent. Okay, thank you. You put the DSA evidence form on there. Thank you, well done. So there's been some thank you, Grace. Thank you, well done, Grace, to see the support has helped you. So that's amazing. So let's see, I think we've got a couple more. Have we got? Grace, is your mentor a member of uni staff or a student or other?
So this is a bit confusing. There's many different services where you can get mentoring from. At the University of Sheffield, we do have an in-house mentor service at what's located at 301. But mentors are a member of staff. No, they are a member of staff who sort of trained as to be a mentor and have sort of experience and knows how to sort of interact with students with disabilities. I have mine because I accessed it midway through the year. I got put with an outside organisation, what's called Spectrum First, what's run in Sheffield, what's incredible, really nice experiences with their mentors. So that's who I access mentoring through. But there's companies up and down the country who do very similar things. The University of Sheffield is quite unique in the fact it has its in-house mentors as well. But yeah, it's basically whoever Student Finance England sort of chooses to do it. But it's not a sort of other student, it's always sort of a member of staff.
Lovely, thank you, Grace.
But yeah, it's basically whoever Student Finance England sort of chooses to do it. But it's not a sort of other student, it's always sort of a member of staff.
Lovely, thank you, Grace. I don't think there is any further questions. If anyone has got any questions, please do. We've got a couple of minutes, so we can sit and wait for you to put them in to the chat. Please, take this time to ask, obviously, any of us any questions. If you can't think of anything now, but you think of something later on in the evening or in a few weeks' time, please, as I said, we will send the contact details out. Please do get in touch. Don't sit on those questions, because obviously we will be able to answer them, I'm sure. And if none of us can, then we will find out who can help you as well. But thank you very much for your time.